Hello, everybody. Welcome to MSP Unplugged's Tech Talk Tuesday, Smart Goals. This is episode number 2 in our fourth quarter living series. I'm your host, Rick Smith. This is the place where you learn tips, tricks, and strategies to help run your and grow your IT service business. Whether you're a one-person shop or you're leading a team for the journey, this is the place for you. Let me go introduce the guy who actually needs no introduction, but he is my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Paco Lebron. How are you today, sir?
Boy, I'm better than good, better than most. Rick needs some WD-40 in that chair. I'll tell you how good I feel today. But no, I feel I'm
He
pretty
does.
good.
He does.
But I don't need no introduction myself, because if for those that should have been paying attention to social media, you have to understand that Mr. Rick Smith was doing his thing today over at Channel Pro's Business Online Summit. So if you missed out, you missed some good content and some takeaways, because he was on there with some heavy hitters. So I suggest you pay attention to the man, because he's getting up in the world. So he doesn't need any introduction himself.
Oh, thank you, sir. I'm trying, but it was actually a good show. And I'm not speaking from my point of view, my personal thing that I did, but I think the whole show was actually good. It was interesting, even though the first part was a little buggy. I know they're gonna fix that, and the recordings are gonna be better for everyone to see. But I think it was a good show for all the presenters today. And yeah, I was outclassed with some heavy hitters, so I'm trying to learn my way through it. It's like being on the air with you, though, Paco. Same thing, big guy, little guy, trying to claw his way to the top there. So, nothing new for me.
Hey, they wouldn't invite you and me to Acronis's Cyber Summit to do our thing. So we'll talk a little bit more about that another time.
Yeah,
but that'll be a good that'll be a little announcement we got going on. So for those that going to Acronis, November 7th to the 9th in Miami in the Fountain Blue, we got a little surprise coming up over there. So if you take a look on the website, see what's going on.
A little surprise.
A little surprise.
Hey, but I hope everybody had a good week. As we continue with our fourth quarter living, which we've been going through it. It's only week one. Week two? Really, we still have we just started week one. The first was, what was that? Oh yeah, last week. So okay, we're in week 2, and it's been moving along. And what I've been doing, and I'll just tell everyone this, as we are working on this fourth quarter living, working on, again, I'll just rehash quickly here, not to take up too much time. We're talking about planning for our fourth quarter, basically how to finish the year strong, and also how to start off the new year strong and in place and ready to go. So what I'm doing actually is working a week ahead of where we are to try to prepare myself. I'm following through with this program just really to get myself in a better position. Then I will be able to say, hey, this really works. We went through this last year, and this is what we're doing now, is hashing out how we do it to prepare. Really, again, finish strong for the fourth quarter, because that we can't pretend that the fourth quarter is over. We're just starting, so there's a lot of business to be done, a lot of opportunities to hit and complete your goals that you set at the beginning of the year, but also putting yourself in a position to be strong, ready to, when that clock strikes midnight on 12/31/21, or excuse me, 12/31/22, you'll be ready for 1/1/23. So, that's the purpose of this. Today, we're going to talk about SMART goals. And from there, I'm going to let Paco start us off.
SMART goals. I didn't realize that's what we were talking about today, because I was going to have to take a little bit of a smarter gentleman than myself to go and explain that. But no, we went ahead and talked a little bit about this last week. Obviously, we talked about the SWOT analysis. So for those that don't know what that is, check out the last episode. But really trying to figure out how to go ahead and do SMART goals. Now, obviously, the last two, this episode and last episode, we're talking about more business operations. Next week, we'll start diving into a little bit more of the technical things that you want to go ahead and take care of. But, you can't really do any of that without really having any SMART goals. Now, what the heck is SMART goals? SMART goals is basically an abbreviation that really is talking about how you should set goals for you to have something that's tangible and that's actually able to go ahead and take care of. Really, it's just an acronym, as you can see on the screen, something that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Really being able to figure out not only what are you trying to achieve, but also when do you want to take care of it, right? Because I think a goal without an expectation, without a plan, without a deadline is just a dream. So you really want to try and make sure that you set some of these going up so that you can make sure that you're not just saying, I want to do X, the end. You want to be able to really figure out how you want to go ahead and get to that goal or goals, and being specific to the point where you get a couple of those on the list, you have your hit list, you kind of take care of them one by one, and then you kind of move forward from there. Rick, have you ever set any SMART goals in the past?
I have, and I've said a few, and I've said a lot actually. And I'll be specific. Most of us, when we set specific goals, and I'll just say for me, it's always, when it comes to business, it always usually revolves around numbers, right? I want to make, here's a specific goal. I want to make 50% more than I did last year, or I want to gain 25% more, increase my client base by 25% more, or my endpoint count, I want to increase by X amount of people. So those are specific SMART goals. Now I use numbers, but they don't necessarily always have to be related to just a number. It can be other things as well.
Sure. So I'll go ahead and go on the air and say I have never set a SMART goal in my entire career. No, I'll be honest. I haven't done it. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the concept escapes me. I cannot figure out how to get as specific as possible. And I'm going to tell you why I've had failures like this. Because I have the squirrel attention. I have that where I go ahead and see something and whoop, squirrel. And I'm just all over the place. That's just unfortunately my nature, but I'm learning to try and discipline myself. And that's really my key word for the year, is really trying to discipline myself. And it's funny because we used to talk about this back when I used to do the Computer Business Podcast with Matthew Rodella. And every year he used to have like a theme word for him to try and focus on. And really this year is discipline, trying to understand, figure out what I need to do, concentrate, and trying to get to it. Right. I mean, and because I tell you, I've many times I've done this. For those that know, I forgot the name of that podcast with the guy, like he does a podcast every day, Fire Podcast Fire, something or whatever. It's a very popular podcast or whatever. But anyway, John Lee Demas. Anyway, so I'm sure people who listen to this probably know who I'm talking about. Well, anyway, he even came out with a thing called the Memory Journal, the Mastery Journal, Freedom Journal. It was called the Freedom Journal. Bought that bad boy. I'm putting in my goals. I'm trying to do whatever. I didn't make it past page 2. So the point is that and it's a flaw, and I can go ahead because you're all my gente. You're my family. I'm talking to you. It's your primo, your cousin Paco here. I'm trying to be honest here, and it's something that my brain just never caught on. And that's because I didn't really understand what SMART goals were. What does it really mean? What does it focus on? Right. So, we could go ahead and dive right in and get into the specific lettering of what does each individual letter of the acronym mean. So the first one is S, which is specific. Objectives should not be confused with each other, right? They cannot be vague, right? You have to really, some examples or questions you should be trying to figure out when you're getting specific is, what do you want to accomplish, right? What are the steps you need to do to get there? Who's responsible being able to complete each step of that goal, right? And we'll talk a little bit more of how you can kind of achieve that, but these are the questions of how you get specific to as you're setting your goal. And we'll give some examples later on, but you can't just say, I'm making $1 million next year. That's not specific. Yeah, you're going to make some great money you're trying to make, but how are you going to get there, right? And trying to figure out that specific nature. When thinking about SMART goals, Rick, anything specific comes to mind that you've maybe thought about or trying to put in place?
Well, yeah. And it's like I say, every year, and it's funny how you said you've never done it. You told me about this. I think it was last year you and I had a conversation about this. And I can't remember if it was online or offline, but we had a conversation about SMART goals. And I remember specifically having that conversation and writing some things out. That's why I know when I had, my chair sucks right now, I think because the screw fell out, but I'm sorry. I'll
Hey,
try not to move.
at least you said sucks and not another word that another one of your presenters at the conference was going ahead and
Oh
letting
yeah.
off on. So, that's a dig at that because anyway, go ahead.
But again, like we talked about this last year. I remember us talking about it, and I set some SMART goals for myself. Now, again, when setting these SMART goals, the way I did it, again, I when it was specific. Now, Paco just said something that's a little different than the way I did it. So maybe that's why they weren't so smart. But I practice with all of this the KISS method, right? Keep it simple, stupid. So when I say specific, I'm being specific. I am saying this is my goal. Now, yes, there are steps that you have to take to achieve those goals, right? So you need to, that's the planning stage of setting a goal. There's one thing to set a goal. You can set a goal to do anything. I want to run a mile, or excuse me, I want to run a marathon next year. But you cannot wait till the day before the marathon to train, right? So you have to set a goal, that your goal is to run the marathon. But now you have to have a plan, right? And that's where I think when you're specific but simple about what you want, then under that is all the bullet points for how you get there, right?
Yep.
I think that takes care of the S portion of this in my view.
Well, I mean, exactly like you said, right? It's like being able to set a goal that is going to remove any uncertainty, right? When you're working on it, right? It shouldn't be broad. It should be really specific on what you're trying to achieve, right? How do you go ahead and, how do you get to the heart of what you're trying to do, right? Like, how are you trying to get to what it is and, figuring out how to get to that, right? Which figuring out how to get there leads us into the measurable, right? Which is the M out of that SMART. And obviously it's kind of tied closely to being how specific you are, but you obviously have to be able to measure it as well, right? You have to quantify how you're trying to get to your milestones, right? And how does that work? Like you just mentioned, numbers, people use deadline dates, some use percentage changes. It will be clearer when you put these measurable milestones per se, right? Or being able to figure out how to measure where you're going. And I think this is where I go ahead and fail. And I think a lot of, smaller MSPs, one person shows, even some of the bigger guys, when I would talk to some of the business coaches, is everyone's trying to, and I've even talked about this at TechCon, where everyone's trying to get KPIs that are industry standard. And they're trying to get these measurable pieces at them. And really, you should be developing your own KPIs because you know what you're trying to do for your business. So what does that mean to you, right? Like, you have to figure out, how do you go ahead and, should you objectively measure how you want to achieve something? How will you be able to track progress that you're completing this goal? Maybe you need to get someone that's going to hold you accountable. Maybe this is somebody where you check in with them at the end of the day or kind of go from there. Is there a way that you can go ahead and maybe use someone as a sounding board where, hey, this is my goal, but I have no idea how I'm going to measure this. This will also help you kind of get some of those measurable action items that you want, but also being able to get those pieces, because you may think of something one way, but if someone having fresh set of ears and holding you accountable can help you get that measurable milestones or measurable pieces of metrics for you to get to your goals. Rick, since we had that conversation last year, which I don't remember, have we went ahead and did any of this off-board, onboarding type situation, or how did you get into the measurements of trying to get your goals going with some of those things that you may have planned in previous years, or maybe what you plan to do coming up in this year?
Well, it's twofold. One is, again, having those specific steps, right? And you don't necessarily all the time, and this is what I've learned, everything when you sit down does not have to be perfect when you start, right? You have a goal. These are the steps I believe I need to take to achieve that goal, right? As you go along, you realize, hey, there's a step in between what I have in step one and step two, right? There's something that needs to go in between. So you make the adjustment for that. And then you go along, and as you're pursuing the goal, working through the specifics through the plan, right? You realize then again, this is a moving target. This is not a on January 1st, this is my goal, and I have to follow these specific steps. And if I don't, I fail. It's a living document, right? So you're going to make those changes as you go along. Now, the reason I'm talking about the changes is because what I learned is in order to measure where I am, I have to see where I'm coming from, right? I have to be able to tell the steps I took in order to measure how I'm doing towards achieving that goal. And you'll know, like, here's a simple example, but it's a lot deeper than this, but you'll know. Let's just say you had a goal to increase your RMR by, I'm just going to use an easy number, say $10,000 for the year. I'm going to increase my RMR from $100,000 to $110,000 a year, right?
Now, when you say MRR, what does that stand for?
I'm sorry. Yeah, MRR. Yeah. I said that right?
No, you said it right. It was just an acronym. I figured in case somebody's listening that doesn't know what MRR is.
Oh, manage recurring revenue, right? So I'm sorry. I was like, did I say it wrong?
No. I was just because I know that sometimes there's a lot of acronyms that are thrown around. I'm just trying to play the Jeff card. I'm just trying to make sure that everyone knows everything's there. So everyone knows MRR is the common term when you're trying to get that recurring revenue, that monthly recurring revenue, manage recurring revenue. So just wanted to see how you use that acronym was all. So
yeah,
sorry to throw your flow off.
No, I'm sorry. I was like, did I say something wrong? But again, so if you want to increase it, let's make it different. Let's make it a little easier. Let's say you want to increase it by $12,000 by the end of the year. Simple math will say, hey, I need to increase it by $1,000 per month. And by month 12, I'll be at $112,000, right? From 100 to 112 is the $12,000 increase I wanted. So now going into the next year, I'm starting next year with $112,000 in MRR. So you can measure that in many ways, right? If we're in month 10 of the year. So if you've increased your MRR by $10,000, you can say, hey, I'm on track. I can measure that I'm on track, right? But also what happens is, so that's a simple explanation for this. And I know we got a lot more to get to, but another way to look at that as well, you could be at $6,000 and still have for this quarter another $6,000. But if you look at the steps you've taken, right, and the plan you've had, have you set yourself up with all of the previous things to get that other $6,000 in this quarter? And maybe that's what it is. If you had if you know that your sales cycle is 8 months or 6 months or whatever the case may be, you may know that all of these things, all these clients and leads I've cultivated all this time, they're about to come due now to get me to that 6,000, or one client may get me there, or 3 clients may get me there, whatever the case may be. But that is how, I look at being measurable, knowing that as I'm making the adjustments to my steps and my plans helps me to measure if I'm on track or on pace to where I'm trying to get. That makes sense?
Yep. Crystal is mud. I get it. So, and I think exactly like you mentioned, I think it's to a point where it's really important to see where you're going by just kind of taking inventory, figure out where it is. Again, going back to what we talked about last week with the SWOT analysis, really understanding where you are and be able to make those milestones so you can go ahead and move forward. Now, we talked about being specific. We talked about trying to make measurements, trying to get those milestones, but can it be achievable? This is a little bit interesting because having a goal that's achievable, you don't want it to be super easy, right? Because then you don't get the satisfaction of achieving it. But on the flip side, you don't want it to be where it's too difficult and it feels pointless for you and your team, right? Or yourself if you're trying to do it. Ultimately, you're going to try, if it is of a pointless nature or you feel like it's too difficult, you're far more likely to accomplish your goals if you could find some type of middle ground between the two, right? It's oftentimes where, if you find that it's between challenging and impossible, sometimes you get to what's called a stretch goal, right? Like what's something that's a little uncomfortable, but you think you can do it if you push yourself just a little bit more. So, so you want to ask yourself certain questions, right? Like, do you think you and your team can complete the objective? Is the stretch goal something that is purposefully challenging, but you still confidently feel like you can achieve it, right? But most importantly, if you set the goal, is it demotivating? Like, is it like, oh, I'll never get to that point, right? Because I know I've done it a couple of times where I say, okay, I want to get to this revenue cycle, and I backtrack and I do the reverse math on what to do it, and now I see what I need to get to there, and I'm like, oh, man, this is going to be so much work slash that's a lot of clients to get at this amount of time, and it's demotivating. Like, I don't think I can do that, right? And then that's a whole nother conversation of mindset and trying to figure out that piece. But really specifically, you want to make sure you set these goals so they're not demotivating, but something that kind of drives you to kind of bring into that opportunity and really get into the point where you want to make it achievable. Because if you achieve it, you get a real sense of completion and really have a satisfaction that, hey, I achieved this goal. Now you're on to the next. Anything to add on that, Rick? We're trying to make a goal achievable.
Yeah, I would say the one thing I use another word. Attainable is the word, achievable, but I use another word, and the answer to this. Everyone listening, is it realistic? Right? Is it a realistic goal? Meaning, again, I'm going to use numbers because it's always the easiest thing to use to get my point across. But again, I emphasize this is for anything. But if you've been doing business a certain way for whatever amount of years, is it realistic to say, hey, I did $100,000 in revenue this year. Next year, I'm going to do 600,000, right? Is that a realistic goal, right? And so is it attainable? Yes. If a lot of perfect things fall in line, it's attainable. It's a realistic goal. But honestly, again, we use data a lot to, data feeds our goals. It feeds our plans, right? We know what we've done in the past. We know how things work. It's like Paco said, working backwards. You set a goal to do, again, add $12,000 to my MRR. What does that mean? I need to do $1,000 a month. That means, or, I need to do 6 clients at $2,000 each, or however you work it out based on where you've been, where your average numbers have been before. If you are a person whose average client, pays you, $1,000, then you may need 12 new clients to get to that $12,000 mark, right? So that's working itself backwards. So, but again, each one, in my opinion, the way I see it, each one feeds into the next. And when you're finished with this, you can work backwards now to see, what works and what now. And when I get to this part about attainable, achievable, is that realistic for me based on what I have for data and what I've done before? Even if I'm going to change my process, or maybe this helps you to determine I have to do some things differently to make this a realistic goal, or make this an attainable goal. So I make those adjustments in the specific plan, make those adjustments in how I measure it, and that'll tell me now if the goal is attainable or realistic.
Which goes right into, you had mentioned, is it realistic? But really in going into the R, where it links into it, is it relevant, right? Is this a goal that you're going to be able to really focus on? This is the goal you can focus on outside of other things you're trying to focus on, right? And other targets or other things that you're trying to figure out, right? Because technically by you completing this goal, it's helping you in a wider direction or in a more further direction than where you're already wanting to head, right? When an objective is relevant, you're more likely to stay interested, but more you're going to feel like you're inspired to be able to complete it, right? So, you got to ask those questions. Why are you setting this objective? Why are you setting this goal? How does it fit into your wider aspirations? Because maybe in your brain, you're saying, all right, if I can get here, this will open up these 2 doors, and I can at least pick one of those, or if one gets messed up, I can go that route. If I go this route, and now you have the ability to kind of scale your growth, right? And being able to set that goal and stack those SMART goals on top of each other because they're part of a bigger vision, right? And, the biggest piece to it is really trying to figure out, what is it going to mean to you if you met that goal, right? What is the relevance? Why are you setting it? Because if you're just setting it just to say, I want $1 million in revenue, that's what I want to do. Why? Why do you want to have $1 million
Right.
worth of revenue? Is it because now you can hire more employees to make things more efficient for yourself, invest in tools to make things automated for you? What is it that you really are trying to put into this goal that's relevant for yourself? Anything to add on to that, Rick?
No, I think that's well said. It's just basically, you know, why do I want to do it, and does it help me move to the next level? Does it, again, the explanation here is, I think, is perfect. Does it contribute to your business's revenue growth? Does it contribute? Does it add any positive to what your overall strategy is? Does it add any positive to your business, to your goals, to your culture, whatever it may be? Is this goal, this specific goal here, going to help to take us to the next level with that? Or what? Or I guess another way to look at it is, what will it do? Like, how does it help us? Basically, going back to what you said. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it allows you for, again, it just gives you a better sense of not only commitment of what you're trying to do, but it will also help you really put things in perspective of why you're trying to do it, right? And then, going back and leading into the last, of the acronym for the goals, SMART goals, is time. And I hate this with a passion because I hate time bound goals. You have no idea, but there's a purpose for it. And the reason why I hate it is because it's very restricting. It's restraining for me. It's concentrated. Like, I want to be able to work at my own pace, but unfortunately, you got to get comfortable with when you got to be. What is it? You got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And that's basically being able to how to drive that, right? Because as everyone says, no one likes when the objective drags on, right? It never gets fully finished. And there's so many unfinished projects you may have or unfinished goals because you didn't set yourself an end date, but an end date that was realistic, right? End date that's realistic. You get scope creep, you got unclear metrics, you're trying to figure out what to do, defining your objective. It's also to make sure you accompany that with a time limit. You got to figure that piece out for yourself, right? You got to figure out if you got to put some padding on there. Are there subtasks within the SMART goal? Which one needs to, who needs to own what? That's why you need good project management software, which we'll name a couple at the end. But, you have to really ask yourself when you're putting these goals, is there any urgent factors that will determine when the goal needs to be done, right? Is it a realistic deadline for the goal to be completed? You may be aggressive, right? But is it realistic? You have to figure out that piece. Do you need to factor in any times that, you won't be able to work on a goal? Maybe there's a vacation coming up. There's a conference that you need to work on, that you need to attend or speak at. What's going to delay you, so you can kind of keep that in mind. But really being able to kind of concentrate, really focusing on where that project is going to go ahead and move forward, because without it having a time bound onto it, you can have a SMART goal for 5 years and it just will never get done, right? And so that's why it's so important to make sure you time what you got going on. Do you suffer from this disease that I have of not liking time, Rick? Because time has been my enemy since I can remember from the longest. And Andres can confirm that with my buddy over at Green Ink, because there's never been an issue with money with me. It's always been time. Time has always been my enemy from the get-go.
And you got to remember, it's the one thing in this life you can't get back, right? Mm-hmm. So I look at it and I totally agree with you. And the way I've learned, or I am learning to deal with this, is when every one of us who's gone through any kind of goal setting or learning about goals, we learn there are 3 types of goals, right? Is long-term, intermediate, and short-term goals, right? The way I look at this is, if you have a long-term goal for your business or a long-term goal for your life, whatever it is, that is the end all. Some of us build our businesses to sell them, right? So that is your long-term goal, to build a business. Let's say you want to build a business and sell it in 10 years. That is your long-term goal. these are the other the intermediate goals and the short-term goals I need to achieve to be to that. It all works backwards again. So these you set intermediate goals and short-term goals that help you achieve the long-term goal. So that's where it gets, a little hinky because again, a 10-year goal can seem like you have a whole lot of time until you're at year 9 and 11 months and you realize I haven't done much to get to this 10-year goal. And that's where the short term and intermediate goals come in that again, can measure whether, measure if the goal is that specific goal, if it's realistic, if it's relevant, all of these things feed back to each other is what I'm trying to say. So again, we all struggle with that. And we all look at time as saying, hey, I got plenty of time. But if we don't plan the short term, the intermediate term, we can never achieve the long term goal.
Yeah. I mean, obviously going through all of these steps, SMART goals can either be an advantage or a disadvantage for you trying to figure out what you want to do for your SMART goals. Advantages is they're going to give you direction. They're going to give you a clarity to how you can go onto your success. It's going to take you out of your comfort zone. It may be an easier way for you to evaluate a project that you've been trying to take on, but you just didn't know how to do it. And so you're taking them in bite-sized pieces, AKA making SMART goals to achieve whatever that project may be. Now, obviously, there's going to be some disadvantages of SMART goals. There could be times where the SMART goal is going to either demotivate you or hold you back. It may feel overwhelming. It may feel like there's just a constraint, again, guilty, and inhibiting you from being able to do what you need to do. You just have to really make sure that you have to do this for not only for yourself, but again, being uncomfortable with comfortable. I'm sorry, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's what I meant to say. And really taking advantage of, what do you want to set as a SMART goal, right? Some examples of what are SMART goals and what aren't SMART goals, right? Like, I'm going to go ahead and get a job at, I'm going to be a security engineer one day. Well, it's not specific enough, right? You don't have the ability to get that cert. You don't have that. It's not specific enough, right? You could say, I'm going to increase my sales by 500% next month. That's not achievable. It's not realistic that's going to go ahead and go for, right? I'm going to go ahead and contact as many people in my sales pipeline as possible until I win new marketing contacts, right? Is that relevant to what you're trying to do for your company pipeline? Do you need to reach out to as many sales prospects as many sales pipeline prospects as possible? Or do you need to go ahead and qualify and figure out who you want as prospects before you go ahead and get those contracts, right? You really have to figure out how you want to do and set these SMART goals. And they have to be, again, specific, measurable, achievable / realistic, relevant, and you have to make sure you put a time bound on yourself. And the best way to really kind of take care of all these or manage these is by using a project management tool. And there's plenty of them out there. There's Trello.com, that's free, I believe still, Asana, ClickUp, and you can, if you're on Microsoft 365, you can use Planner right inside of Office 365 / it's also, integrated in Teams as well. So being able to utilize a project management tool will help you manage some of these tasks on boards and task lists, but also it'll help you give a a picture of being able to see that what you want to go ahead and achieve. So SMART goals in a nutshell is what I got for you all for today. Rick, anything else you want to add on to SMART goals?
Well, you said this more eloquently than I'm going to say it because I can't think exactly how it is, but a goal, what is it? What did you say? A goal is just a dream until it's written down. What did you say? You said something.
Goal. Damn, what was it I said? Goals without any man, I forgot what I said. It was like goals without any measurements.
He's so profound.
Yeah, no. It's for behind the scenes. If you were at TechCon, apparently I said such a great quote, and I remember saying it. It flowed really well. And they were like, "Will you say that again?" Nope, one time only. Can't repeat
That's
that
where
to
the
save
best
my
ones
life.
come from.
That's where the best ones come from, because I'm an impromptu person. But be not goals without execution are just dreams, I think is what I said. I know it's probably somewhere around there, but I rewind in the beginning, and whatever I said, that's what we're trying to say right
We'll
now.
get back to it. But the bottom line on that is you got to write it down, right? You got to write it down. You got to see it. You got to work on it. Like I said, I happen to believe, and there's different schools of thought to this, but I happen to believe that a goal, goals are written documents, right? And they're live documents. You make those adjustments on the fly. If you know what the end goal is and you have your specific steps you think you need to take, as you go through, you learn there's certain things I got to do that I didn't think of, or I got to make some adjustments to how I measure or how I, see this, or even sometimes maybe it's your time frame, right? If you're being realistic and you're following through on it, those things will come to you, right? You'll see them. You will see them. Now, again, we use our minds a lot for, in this job, a lot of things just come to us. We do. Somebody confronts you with a problem. Hey, this doesn't work. In your mind, you've seen it 100 times. You go through the steps, click, 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 and it's done. Or, little tune up here, turn a screwdriver here, whatever. And it's finished and you've done it, right? This is how our brains work mostly as techs. Well, again, John did this great presentation on documentation. Documentation is life. And it's the same thing with setting goals. It needs to be written down. It needs to be adjusted as you need to. And that's how you learn from it. And my last point on this is we have to use, when we're setting goals, specifically number goals or, business goals, we have to use past data to help us make these goals realistic, right? So again, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've come from. You can't make adjustments to things if you haven't paid attention to what has worked and what hasn't worked, right? Because again, doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result is what? Insanity, right?
Insanity.
So that's why we write these things down. We measure them, we tweak them, we know what works, what didn't work, and that helps us that sets us up for moving forward. So if I can leave everybody with anything, it is just make sure that, when you're setting goals, you make sure you write them down, put them somewhere you can see. I have a board here on my left-hand side. So anybody comes to my office, it's a glass whiteboard, and everything I'm trying to do is there, right? All my goals are written down there. Now, the specific steps are not necessarily there. They're written someplace else. But every time I walk into my office, I know what it reminds me of what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm not gonna say it works all the time, because it doesn't. It's tough, but we need to practice discipline. And we know we need to just keep referring back, and that's how we grow.
Goals without a plan are just dreams.
That's what it was. You got it.
Yep. But that's all I got, folks. Go ahead and kick it off. Rick, to sign off. The survey is going out tonight. I promise you. We've been saying this for the last 3 weeks.
Did you say that last week?
No, I said this last week and the week before. I'm hitting the send button right now. I thought it was scheduled and it was not scheduled. So I'm hitting the send button right off we get to this this broadcast. You will get the survey. You will get the link for the photo albums. We'll be updating that throughout the week because we're still getting some of the photos in. We also have all the presentations that should be in that folder in the OneDrive. We'll make sure that you have that. If you don't see the presentation you're looking for, reply to the email. We'll try and make sure to get that presentation for you. So with that, I'll kick it off to Rick, but that's all I got for tonight.
Okay. For everyone, again, I am going to say this really quick, not make it long, but as we go through these things, if you have something to contribute, we definitely could use your input. Would love your input, whether it's on a Facebook page or whether you sign up and come on the show and talk through it with us about what you're doing or some ideas you have that can help the community, that can help us, some things you may have seen that we may have missed. Please feel free to, send us an email, get on the schedule, come on the show. Again, I'm going to keep saying this. Paco and I have ideas. His are different than mine, and certain, or mine's are different than his. And then some things we're very similar on, but we do not have a monopoly on good ideas. And that's not, and, we do not all our ideas are not good, or may only work for us. So we're not here to dictate how people should do things. It's just we're basically regurgitating back how we do things or how we are approaching things and moving forward. But I'm sure there are people out there who do things different than us, have some more diverse opinions, and the community can benefit from that. So I encourage everyone. Again, I said I wasn't going to make it long, but I do encourage everyone. Please, come on the show. Spend some time with us. It's only an hour. You can tell you've met us all, so we're not intimidating fellas. And I'm speak for myself because Paco's an eloquent guy. I'm not that eloquent, so you can't do no worse than I am if you're worried about being on camera. So, again, I'm just throwing that out to everyone. Come on the show, share your opinion, share your learnings, and the community, I'm sure, will benefit from that. With that, I'm just going to tell everybody again, we're here every Tuesday and Thursday, so we ask you to tune in. Our video podcast is on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged, facebook.com/MSP Unplugged. And we're also on LinkedIn, just hashtag MSP Unplugged, and you'll find us there. What is important now, we didn't emphasize this before, we just kind of brushed over it, but we do need you guys to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button when you're on, particularly on YouTube. That helps us, helps the algorithm, helps to get us seen by more people. And that'll let you know, again, whenever a new episode is available. You can also take us on the go if that's the way you prefer to listen on your favorite podcatcher app. We're on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and some of the other popular ones. But, we do appreciate you listening. Want to thank you. We'll see you next week on MSP Unplugged.